Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Motivated Property Podcast. It is Friday, the 12th of September, 2025. Hope everyone out there is having a fantastic week. Now look, guys, this week is not going to be a property podcast. This is going to be a little bit different to our normal, I guess, sort of agenda of what we like to speak about here. I'm going to be honest. I'm pretty disappointed right now. So for those who've opened any form of social media or, watch the news in the last 24 to 48 hours, most people would be aware that a guy in the US, a political commentator by the name of Charlie Kirk, has been assassinated. Now, I guess to really sort of start, today's show is going to be about Charlie. Right. And there's a few reasons why, in the spirit of this podcast, in the spirit of what we're doing here, in the spirit of talking and free speech and all the values that we really have and love and need in order to have a healthy society. Now, the fact of the matter is, obviously, Charlie and what happened to Charlie has got nothing to do with property and investing. So I do understand that if this show is not for you today, I completely understand. But there is a part of me that feels like, we're not doing the right thing unless we actually talk about this in a particular way. I'm really saddened about Charlie, and I didn't think, I didn't think that he was as big as what he was until I've seen the amount of people sharing stuff about him over the last couple of days. And to be clear, I didn't agree with everything what Charlie said. Right. In fact, there's a lot of stuff that I'd probably disagree with him on, but it's not about that. It's about what he stood for. And that for me is the most important thing. And that for me is part of the reason why I even started this podcast in the first place. See, what Charlie stood for was dialogue. It was talking. It was debating. It was the battle of ideas. It was having people voice an opinion and have a counter opinion and try and work out what the best actual result is or what the best actual thing is for the people and for the individual. And that fundamentally is his overall message. In fact, one of the probably more important quotes that I'll never forget, and this is one of the things that I do try and live by today. The second that we stop talking is the second that violence starts. Now, really what he's saying is the second that we stop talking about our differences and we just isolate, because you have a different view to me, I'm just going to cut you off. Like, this is really where violence starts taking a slippery slope, right? And that fundamentally was his most important and his main message when it comes to the things that he would essentially talk about. Now, like I said, he is probably one of the big inspirations for me starting the show. Yeah, and the nature of what he stood for is fundamentally the nature of exactly what this whole show's all about, right? And that for me is one of the reasons why I'm so disappointed the fact that he was assassinated. In other words, someone didn't like what he had to say and then silenced him physically. And that violence is the very thing that he's been trying to stop and standing for ending the entire time. The fact that violence is won in this case is probably the biggest thing I'm disappointed by right now in this world. Having said that, Charlie was best known for going around university campuses throughout the US and debating people. So I remember watching him many years ago, and it started off with him having just a chair and a microphone and having people walk up and talk about certain topics, whether it was, abortion or free speech or, gun ownership or, left versus right politics or, whether it's, globalism versus nationalism, things like, Christian beliefs. He was obviously a very big Christian and had faith, university and college and the importance of college in general. So these were all the topics that he would go and talk to students about. And the idea was to have a debate, have a dialogue, have an idea of, here's my idea, what's your idea? Let's have these ideas battle and see what comes to the top. But part of the problem we've got today, these topics have become extraordinarily divisive. Some people believe that, we should have the right to an abortion. Other people believe that we shouldn't have the right to have abortions. And again, because it's so divisive, many people tried to silence him. Many people just came up just to abuse him. Many people completely disagreed, didn't even want to give him a chance to talk. And this is fundamentally a part of the problem with our culture today, in the fact that, and look, to be clear, guys, most of the people listening to this, I would imagine if you've been listening to this show for quite some time, you kind of get that, we believe in capitalism, right? We believe in the fact that people should have the right of private ownership. You should have the right to own a house. You should have the right to invest. You should have the right to build wealth and make money and do all these different things. But there's probably people in your life who are the complete opposite side of the spectrum. They believe in socialism or communism, and the government should own everything and we should all be fair and equal. But the point is, right now in today's society, many people, just because you've got an opposite belief, they cut you off. They stop talking. They ignore you. They isolate you. They, there's and that can come in many different ways and shapes and forms. But just know that if that's the way that we're going to go as a society, like we are being fractured. Now, the idea that this is done by design, I'm not even going to go there today. All right. Obviously, divide and conquer is certainly a fantastic tactic when it comes to controlling people. I'm not even going to broach this conversation. That's all I'm really going to say about that. But the point is, look at society today. I mean, in Australia in particular, you've got some people who are pro something. You've got people who are against something, and all that stands between them is abuse. You've got people who believe in, one thing, or people who believe in something else, and they just don't have a conversation, and they completely isolate themselves and stay in their own bubbles. And in those bubbles that they're in, it is just getting worse and worse and worse. And the depths of hatred between each side, I don't think we've lived in a time, particularly in my lifetime, and again, I'm still fairly young, so not that long, but I don't think there's been a time in my lifetime where it's been this bad. And again, what happened to Charlie is a symptom of this bigger problem. Now, the fact that I was born in the US, and obviously I am a US citizen, I'm an Australian citizen as well, I was under the assumption that not many people have actually heard about Charlie Kirk. And one of the things that I've sort of noticed over the last 24 hours, and one of the things I'm truly grateful for, is seeing so many different people share about him. Right, so that just tells me that he actually reached way more people than I even thought was possible, which is, I think that's absolutely fantastic. And my genuine hope is that his message now becomes amplified. Again, not his beliefs or not his perspectives, but what he stood for. The fact that we as a society, we need to be talking. We need to be debating. We need to have this open dialogue, because again, as soon as the talking stops is when the violence starts. Now, whether it's climate change, whether it's vaccines, whether it's all these different things that are extraordinarily divisive, if we get stuck in our echo chambers on either side and there's no dialogue, like, there is absolutely zero way we can find a middle ground and find something and find something forward. And in one side, you've got the right in politics who don't believe in say climate change, and this is just an example, right? Or whether it's vaccines. You got the left that absolutely do believe in climate change and do believe in vaccines. But I guess the point is now, like, this shit shouldn't even be political. Like, we shouldn't be dividing certain topics. And look, if climate change is as bad as what people say, like, that's going to impact us all. We should all be working together, but notice how we're not. Notice how it's completely political. If you believe in this type of politics, you believe that climate change is real. If you believe in this type of politics, you believe climate change isn't real. And it's like, if this is legit, this is an existential threat to our species' fucking survival. And it's completely political. In one side, completely believe it, one side, and like, this is the world that we're living today in 2025. And it's because we are not talking. We are not open for debate. We're not open to have ideas, have people poke holes in it and realize that we're wrong and formulate new ideas. And I don't know how this happened. whether it's social media, whether it's the media, whether it's propaganda, whether it's, I don't understand how we got to this point where now violence is just the resort. Like now people just get assassinated because we don't want to hear what they've got to say. And that's a very, very dark place for us to be today in 2025. Now, as much as I am truly inspired about the people who are sharing about Charlie and the fact that they were touched by his message, I'm also a little bit saddened by the amount of people who are celebrating his death. Whether they didn't agree with him, whether they thought that he was wrong about colleges or abortions or guns, whatever it is. I mean, some of the stuff that I've been seeing over the last couple of days, people celebrating and saying it's so ironic that, he got shot by a gun, yet he was for guns and was for firearms. There's been people who've been saying, and I've seen a couple of people say this and talk about how, Charlie was so okay with school shootings and he deserves this. And this is just an absolutely sickening thing to think. To be clear, I've followed Charlie for years. I've listened to I've listened to hours and hours of his debates over the years. And again, I do that so I can help formulate my own opinions and have my own ideas stress tested against other people. And again, I'm not saying that I believe in everything Charlie said. Certainly don't. I thought a lot of the stuff he said that I certainly don't buy into, and there's other perspectives that I think are a lot, whether it's fairer or whatever the case is. But to sit here and say that he was for school shootings is absolutely sickening. Now, to be clear, what Charlie really was talking about, and this is something that I'm gonna speak to, because it's something that I think a lot of people don't really understand. Throughout history, there have been multiple times when firearms have been taken away from the people. Whether it's years or decades later, there have been tyrannical governments who have then caused genocides on those people because they couldn't defend themselves. Stalin, Mao, Hitler. These are some examples of people who took people's ability to defend themselves away and then caused genocides and killed untold millions of people afterwards. What Charlie was talking about with gun control is not that he condoned school shootings or innocent shootings. He absolutely did not, ever. What he was talking about is, in one hand, we have a number of school shootings throughout the US, and it is absolutely sickening and disgusting, and it needs to end, and it needed to end years ago. But at the same time, the amount of people killed in school shootings versus the amount of people killed in historic genocides, it was his perspective that it's more important to ensure people have the ability to protect themselves because way more people will get killed in genocides than in school. That was fundamentally his message. Now, do I agree with that in total? Absolutely not. I don't agree with everything apart about that. But there is a part of me that absolutely does agree with the fact that we need to ensure that as a people, not only do we have the ability to protect ourselves against, whether it's home intruders or, personal security, but I do believe, and one of the things that's missing here in Australia is our ability to protect ourselves against tyrannical governments. Now, to say that Charlie was for school shootings, I think is one of the most sick and twisted and disturbing things that people can say about him, particularly within 24 hours after his death. I think it's absolutely disgusting. And yet notice how many people have that perspective in the comments. Notice how many people truly believe that that's what he said because they've bought into the propaganda of the day. Now, anytime we make this about gun control, which is what people are trying to do right now, we take the responsibility away from the actual killer. It's so easy to blame guns. And I'm not saying guns are good or bad or what, I'm not saying that. A gun is a tool. You can have a hammer, you can build a house. You can have a hammer and hit yourself in the head and kill yourself. It's not the hammer's fault. The hammer's just a hammer. It's just a tool. It is the person and the intent of the person wielding it. Now, people say, oh, but in America, they've got, everyone can have guns and blah, blah, and therefore guns are evil. Sure. I don't personally buy into that. I've got firearms here in Australia. I'm a legal firearm owner. None of my firearms have done anything remotely close to what happened to Charlie Kirk. Now, the second that we tunnel vision, we focus on guns, that assassin, he gets a get out of jail free. He gets a free pass. Like, we've just taken all the responsibility away from him, and we can just now sit and make guns the bad person. We, as a society, I am starting to think that we may be in trouble with the way that we're going here. If we sit here and blame others and blame the other side, and the other side's the problem, we're just perpetuating this exact same problem. Now, just to be clear, there is a part of me right now that wants to start hating the left. There's a part of me that wants to start bringing hatred into the mix. And all that really is my biology just wants to get bought into the bullshit and get stuck into the bullshit and be tribal and join a side and join the fight. But here's a reason why I believe we all need to not do that. If we get joined into this and we become a part of this divisive conversation, this is probably going to happen again to more people. This is now a time that we, as a culture, as a human species, we need to unite. We need to understand the fact that we're all different, and those differences are totally okay. We need to get the fact that not everyone is our enemy. We need to get the fact that if someone has a differing opinion to you, that doesn't make them a bad person. That doesn't mean that they need to be silenced or removed or killed. We need to ensure that we don't be the ones that brings hate and anger to this equation, because all we're going to do is make this worse. What we need is love. What we need is compassion and understanding and patience. And in the spirit of this conversation, and in the spirit of this podcast for that matter, he was one of the biggest inspirations of starting this show, like I mentioned, right? Now, does that mean that everything I say on this show is correct? No, it's not. Half the stuff that I say is my opinion. Part of the reason why you guys listen to this show is because you want to hear my opinion. And not to say that my opinion's more important than anyone. I'm certainly not saying that. But there may be things that I say on this show that you completely disagree with. And that's completely okay. But the point is, I'm giving you thoughts and ideas and things to think about that are either going to land for you or you're going to completely disagree with. But the point is, am I right? No, I'm not. You might be right. And that's okay. But the whole point of it is so that you can have my ideas and your ideas and have them conflict in your own mind, and then for you to work out what's the best idea for you. And that fundamentally is the spirit of everything that he stood for. And that is the thing that we need to, and we have a responsibility to continue. And unless we do, the game's over. There's going to be more of these assassinations. There's going to be more killing. There's going to be more violence. There's going to be civil war. And if you think for a second this is isolated to the US, you are absolutely effing crazy. This is everywhere. We need to unite. And as much as we can't change what's happened here, I'm extraordinarily disappointed in what's happened. But we can use this event as something to divide us again and keep dividing us, or we can use this as a lesson and a wake-up call that we need to be the people that makes the difference. Now, how do we do that? We do it by talking. We do it by debating. Sure, I've seen a bunch of Charlie's debates over the years where there wasn't nice things said either way. People were nitpicking and being very blunt with the way they say things and all those little gotcha moments on camera. But I also saw hours and hours and hours of Charlie actually being very patient with people and being very compassionate, empathetic, and understanding the fact that, hey, you only know and you've got that perspective from your experience, but hey, that's not all that's out there. And here's other ways, here's other things to think about. I saw countless videos of him debating people with compassion and empathy. And for half the population right now to sit here and say that he was some evil person who was divisive and in my mind, it is absolutely insane that we're living in a world where half the people, they honestly, genuinely believe that he was an evil person and what he stood for was evil. But my encouragement is we need to put the anger and the hatred away. And unless we do, this shit's just going to continue. My hope, and the thing that I'm going to continue doing, is amplifying the message of dialogue. Amplifying the message of unity. Amplifying the message of debating ideas and finding out what is the best way that we can move forward together. I really do hope that this is a wake-up call. I really, really do. The cynical part of me doesn't believe it is, but I really do hope that many people see this, understand what's actually happened here, and the fact that a voice who has been trying to help has been silenced. And my hope is we use this as a lesson to unify us and make us stronger as a society. That's pretty much all I've really got to say. I do appreciate you guys for listening. I do appreciate you guys as listeners. And I hope that you take this as a lesson and you be the person in your community that stands for truth, stands for conversation, stands for an open dialogue, especially with the people you disagree with. Because the second that we stop talking is the second that violence starts. Love you guys.